All right, well, now I can hear myself, so all right, fine. I mean, I do sound good.
You sound okay.
There we go. So, hello, everybody, and welcome to We Built the City, a world-building show with me, John Cardello, and Rich Paula.
Hello again from this morning.
If this is your first time watching each episode, there we go. Each episode, we take 3 topics.
If that's what you call them. I mean, it's perfectly okay to call them whatever you want.
Well, whatever.
Okay.
Like, I was going to say each week, but that'd be inaccurate.
That would be inaccurate. Episode is fine.
Whatever.
Episode's fine. Whatever you want, John. You
Each
tell me.
each time we get together for this, we do some world building, usable in Dungeons and Dragons, Shadowrun, just a variety of things, focusing on several topics for the week. That specific week, and this week we have a few.
You getting a call? Who's calling you?
I'm getting.
Who is it?
It is. I have somebody who's coming in from out of town, so they're probably calling. I don't know why, but
Is it your mom?
yes, it is my mom. She's just got back from Virginia. She flew there. Anyhow, now that we're wildly off topic, let's get ourselves back on course. This is again a world building. This is a world building show where each week we take a variety of topics and we use them to flesh out things that can be used in different role playing games, whether it's ones that we're working on ourselves or ones that people just use in general.
You want to see something amazing?
Mm-hmm.
I'm in John's camera.
Whatever.
All right. So what are we doing tonight, John?
Well, so tonight's topics are.
I should say, what are we building?
Okay. So tonight we have the 3 topics are legends and lore, flora and fauna, and dangers and encounters.
Dangers and encounters. Ooh, okay.
Let's start with legends and lore. So again, I have been working on, or just still in very, very early stages, a superhero kind of concept. Don't have it fully fleshed out just yet, but I've been working on heroes without hazard pay. And so I think Legends and Lore would be a good thing for that, because we can kind of set up like legacy characters or things like that. Or even just a matter of overall things about the world. Last time we came up with the setting of Jewel City and how that kind of came about. Again, this week we can kind of go into details about Legends and Lore and kind of take it from there. So I was thinking about more like street level heroes. Like I've yet to determine to what extreme I'd like to have powers. If there would be powers, I don't picture it's going to be anything too elaborate. But that also could just be the players themselves. It doesn't necessarily mean that there could be more superpowered individuals. So in terms of, let's say, Legends and Lore, what's a good place we could start with, or what's something we can kind of maybe cement? Oh, I am forgetting the things that we have designed for this such occasion. Let me pull up our notes.
So is this Legends and Lore? Is this to go? I'm sorry. Is this to add to like the city that we built last time?
Well, not necessarily. Okay. So Legends and Lore, you have history, fact versus fiction, relics and artifacts, cultural importance. So Legends and Lore, in terms of, let's say, what we traditionally think with role playing, is usually gods, deities, religions, things like that. If we think about it in a more realistic or modern setting, you have things like the Legend of King Arthur, the Lost City of Atlantis, things like that. So it could be pretty much anything, really. We'd like to just kind of determine the history of it, how much of it real, how much of it is not, if there's any relics or artifacts involving of such legend and lore, and cultural importance. So what if you have where, in a world where, let's say, superpowers exist, or at least where there's some level of powers or whatnot.
Right.
I'm thinking the idea that, certain legends and myths from the past might be a little bit more believable than once considered. The idea of
what?
For example, Marvel has Thor, and so they kind of explore a lot of the history and the ideas of Thor, that whole Norse mythology thing, and how they kind of turn it to their own angles. This could be something along the lines of what if there's an Aztec god, or even like a Native American spirit who actually happens to be real. You see stuff like that with Shadowrun as well. Like with Shadowrun, when magic comes back, you find out that a lot of Native Americans a lot of their legends and myths and whatnot actually have some sway. So in terms of, let's say, something like that, what would be something good? So why don't we go with maybe, again, let's some sort of deity that maybe actually does have a.
So you're talking about like an avatar of the deity that walks the earth.
Not even necessarily an avatar. Like, what if it, let's say,
actual deity?
Well, no. Let's put it this way: you have someone who, in the past, was worshipped as a god because they had superpowers. Maybe a religion does form in their honor, and there's like a like there is a following of devout worshippers who still kind of practice their teachings and beliefs. Some of which may or may not even have some of the similar powers or shared abilities. But it's this kind of thing of like, well, what if let's say a figure from ancient history, was real, and again, like the idea that like aliens built the pyramids and things like that, like like again, kind of thinking with Marvel.
That's not a theory.
What?
That's not a theory.
Whatever. So yeah, like the idea of, let's say, like a legend centered around an individual or being who then kind of formed something much larger surrounding
All right, so I'm trying to get my head around it. So it's an entity, a person, being on the planet, that whatever planet this happens to be, that is real and had superpowers, and because of that they were worshipped as a god.
Yes.
And that's fallen out of practice, except for a cult that still follows it.
Well, it's not even so much that it's fallen out of practice. It's that people in maybe there was a period of time when the knowledge of superpowered beings was still fairly small. It might have been dismissed as rumors and like I said, superstition.
Yeah.
But now that in a world where things are much more public and aware, people are realizing, oh no, this could have actually been something. But nobody really knows the true history other than the most devout who never really gave up the faith,
Okay.
So you could even think of something along the lines of I'm thinking it kind of just popped in my head, but I'm just thinking of that the early colonists of the United States, when they came over and let's say settle on these lands, maybe things were a bit more hazardous than they thought, and maybe there was a forgotten colony, what's that one that went missing that had the word that was painted on
Oh, you're thinking about
not Roanoke.
Roanoke.
It is Roanoke?
Yeah, it's Roanoke.
I thought it was
it's the lost colony of Roanoke.
What if there's something like that? This colony, something happened with this colony, but it's reality. People have said that, people believe that really what happened was the place became uninhabitable. They went elsewhere and just settled there, and just nobody bothered to go, really put two and two together. So what if you have this, this lost colony from, early Americas, where one of them just happened to be an empowered being.
All right, so let's start with the empowered being.
In terms of what they did.
No, I mean you want to build the legends and lore, right? So what are the powers of this being? What are the points that you have to cover?
So history, fact versus fiction, relics and artifacts, and cultural importance.
Okay, so facts versus fiction. What are his abilities?
So that's something that's fire based. Something that in early colonial times when they don't have heat, they don't have so many things. Something that can create fire, I feel, is probably very useful. And it's in terms of, let's say, good for protection, for warmth, for hunting. Food, things like that.
Now, can he just create fire, or does he actually turn into fire, or something like that? Do his hands turn into fire?
I would think that control over it, they maybe to different
control
levels
over it,
like the Human Torch, they can manifest flame, and as a result, they can spread it out, they can bring it to themselves, they can extinguish it, but this basically this living fire in human shape, essentially.
I got it.
So I'm thinking. So we have history. So yeah, you have the lost colony of Roanoke.
Except you'll change the name.
Well, yeah, we'll have to come up with something. And maybe it could be that the reason why it fell is because maybe they encountered some other either like hardships or whatever, or or let's say like as the colonies were spreading out along, because it started on the east and then fanned out west, right? Maybe they went west much further than, let's say, even the gold rush, just seeking better lands, and ended up just like settling down somewhere that eventually,
What if him and his followers were driven out by another entity?
Oh, like another being, essentially.
Yeah.
I like that. And they were forced out to somewhere where they might not normally thrive, and then as a result, they just became much more secluded, which also would explain the whole cult idea. And
or nomadic.
Or nomadic. That's another thing too.
If they're nomadic, it's harder for people to get a grasp on who they are.
Mm-hmm. I like that. So this being, and the colony were driven away by another entity. For good or bad, who's to say?
Right.
It could be that they tried to settle, and then Native Americans had their own superpowered being who tried to maybe they were not able to do much against let's say sheer numbers of the larger colonies.
Yeah, they overextended themselves.
Right, and then as a result, they were driven further west and further south to
they couldn't be destroyed, so they were driven out.
Well, right, that's what I'm saying. They managed to kind of at least they were not able to keep their claims, so they had to more or less vacate. And then kind of like you said, kind of maybe spread. Well, the thing about nomadic though is that I don't know how well that would keep the legend, unless it's the nomads who then splintered off still revered this being, and kind of kept it in the way that, let's say, other warships eventually kind of grew out of the United States. Their belief in this kind of stayed true.
Right.
Kind of like the way you'd have Mormons or whatever. No, that there's this very devout group that still worships this being. Now the only question though is that we're talking hundreds of years, so the original being themselves is probably gone, but maybe they had offspring who might have inherited their powers, or it could have been that they helped to father children with many of the tribes, and each one of the groups that splintered out was a child of so and so.
Okay, all right. I think that's a good idea. That actually adds credence to if you follow other creationist stories of fantasy worlds and stuff. That holds true to a lot of it.
It also could be that people forget what the original progenitors abilities were.
Mm-hmm.
So some of its followers and its children and their children's children might still retain those basic powers of fire, but they always believe that the progenitor was almost like a living son, when in reality it was just so you could have this cult of lesser superpowered individuals who are basically it's trying to reclaim, trying to. What never really existed. Yeah.
Though the followers believe they're owed something.
Right. And that's why we were one of the first colonies. We were splintered out. We were driven. We were well, right. Yeah.
They wrongly believe they deserve to be there.
Because they believe they believed and they were forced to fan out. So as a result, they think that they like I said, they are some of the truest children of the nation, and as a result, you have this, and actually that kind of gets really kind of not necessarily dark, but that can kind of get really extreme when you have these people who are so devout both in their own abilities but also their right to claim the lands.
Well, it sets up a perfect cult or protagonist or antagonist.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. This cult of, I'm just trying to think of like a good name for this cult, or at least a good name for, like, let's say this original, and like I said, these the followers would probably call themselves, like, the children or descendants of the blank.
Martek.
Martek?
Yes.
Just popped up at your head?
Yeah.
Children of Martek.
I mean, subject to change.
Yeah. I'm not against it.
It's just what popped out.
Forgotten, Children of Martek, Forgotten Son of America.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm. Forgotten Son. It could be S-U-N or, yeah.
Of the Americas. Or North America, or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, of the new lands.
Right.
Let's change this a little bit. I have my computer over here. It's working hard. Hardly working. It's doing something.
It's kind of helps. It could be like one of those things where you see a lot of like a lot of those museums that still have like the old like colonial kind of like artifacts and stuff like that.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
even
Absolutely.
have some of them on the island.
Yes.
Like they have like old, like not necessarily pilgrim, but like early colonized relics and whatnot. So that'd be a great excuse for like, well, why some of these places still exist? Like, oh yeah, because they as an Americana museum, but also they're like recruiting or like keeping it as a network of like, oh, like only the true children have like this flag of like. It's like the American flag, but instead of stars, like there's like candles or something like that. Yeah, I like that. It's a good cult.
Yes. They all become museum workers. Across America, that's their network.
Well, not even necessarily like the museum workers, but like curators. Of just like curators. like because it's not like not like. Although some of them if some of them do try to get like the same kind of clout and work their way into like a major museum or something like that, that is something that's like a cool like that, like I said, a cool antagonist of like, oh, there's this person who you would never suspect the the museum owner to be, or like the guy at the guy who's working at the Smithsonian to be I knew what I meant. To be the bad guy.
Eddie may not be the bad guy.
Anybody in chat?
No, not really. Oh, a few actually. Dave was in chat for a little bit.
Okay.
Lurks, LURXX.
Okay.
Game Master Games Live. That's Dave, and Courtney's out there.
Cool. Any comments?
So then I was wrong. There are people out there.
Yeah, I'm just checking for comments.
No, just me.
Yeah,
I'll let you know if there's comments.
Sure.
I'll stop you. I'll be like, wait, comments.
All right. So I think we could move on to next category, flora or fauna.
You still have 1 minute left in this category.
I think we're good. All right, fine. Like
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I came up with like a symbol. I came up with the whole kid and caboodle. I mean, it's based on like, well, I guess like we decided we weren't sure if it was going to be like an actual real world setting or not, so we don't necessarily need to call it Roanoke. We can kind of give it the equivalent of something like that. But Martek, Forgotten Son of the New Land.
What's the next one?
Again, flora and fauna.
No, I meant, do you have like a particular...
Like what?
Like, what's it for?
Oh, what do you mean?
Well, I can talk about the geraniums in an apartment building.
Okay.
We can talk about...
Okay, so flora and fauna. So, like, we're talking about, let's say...
where are you going to drop it? What type of world are you dropping it in? That's really what I meant.
I mean, we can continue on my thing, but like, I don't know if do you have anything that you. Well, you mentioned that like the thing that you're working on, you're planning on doing more pre-built models and stuff.
Yeah,
so
more
it doesn't
pre-built.
fit for that. Okay, you know what? Fine. I have something I'm running tomorrow night, which the thing of it is that like it might be maybe spoiling it then if we talk about it too early, but that's fine. I don't think it's anything too. I'm setting up basically a mountain that my group is going to need to explore.
Okay.
There is the general location is that they're currently in a town known as White Blossom, which is where it is a coastal adjacent town. It's not on the coast, but it's very close to it. There's a lot of trees and groves.
What's in the way of them in the ocean?
In one direction, nothing. It's just like you just go straight and there's a coastal town. What they're
Okay.
heading to next is a place called the Widow. Because the Widow kind of stands, kind of not necessarily directly in the, like overshadowing White Blossom, but it's very close enough. It's where the party's looking to head to next.
And that's the mountain.
It is the mountain. Yep, it is rumored to be the former, or at least it's believed to be the either the grave or the domain, depending on who you ask, of a white dragon that was terrorizing the lands many years ago, but has not been seen for quite some time. The party's heading to the Widow because they're trying to track down a criminal gang that they believe is there. So I'm kind of thinking that this whole snowy approach, like they've already picked up a bunch of like kind of like snow gear and boots and things like that. So I'm thinking what would be some good stuff to kind of populate the mountain. I was thinking about like in terms of flora and fauna. I was thinking we were talking about much more icy. So I'm thinking.
So somewhere above the tree line, there's a volcanic lake.
That actually, I've already mentioned that is kind of there. There is a no, not necessarily. There is a lake that is kind of up at the bluff of the mountain that they are specifically told do not go because inside the lake itself is a Remorhaz that is kind of like it's made its home.
They've been told that.
They were told that the Remorhaz is there. Yes. Now, granted, that's not necessarily to say that
it doesn't kill itself.
What?
It doesn't kill itself.
No, Remorhazes only can thrive in cold temperatures because they have that internal, like temperature thing going on where like they're automatic.
I thought they shot lightning.
No,
Electrocute themselves.
No, I don't think so. I think they're
Okay.
I think that's like ice and fire based.
I believe you.
I mean, I might be confused.
No.
You got to Google it to prove me wrong.
No, I'm not. I'm not. I not to prove you wrong or right.
But so I'm thinking like some good speed. Well, so I'm thinking it probably would be. It's kind of mountainous. There's probably going to be like some mountainous yaks or things like that that would be kind of indigenous to the area. Some aurochs. That's the right word, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aurochs.
Aurochs. There could be a mountainous race that lives there that would be a good fit to kind of spring on the party, but they're kind of already heading to one of this gang that's there. I was thinking about more like well, actually that could be the next category, but I was thinking about more like environmental hazards that they'd have to kind of deal with and tackle. What's up?
No, I was just looking at it. It's immune to both cold and fire.
I told you.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like a
swallow. That was what it was. Okay, I was thinking of something else. Okay, good.
Maybe in earlier editions they might have had
no.
powers.
No, it's always been the same.
Okay.
You were correct. I was completely thinking of something else. Anyway, so all right, so this Remorhaz lives in the lake. Okay.
It's at the bluff of the mountain. Like,
so is that why? So is that why the lake isn't frozen over?
It could be, yeah.
Because it lives there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so it's not volcanic.
It's still very warm, but like the only reason why, like it thrives in colder temperatures, so maybe it likes living in the lake to keep it cold.
Here's what I would do. I would put a temple up towards one of the if the white dragon hasn't been seen, then maybe a cult of the white dragon has gone up there and built a temple around what used to be an entrance, like its servant's entrance.
Well, I've kind of kept the reason why the dragon has not been seen kind of secret.
You can still have the temple up there.
Yeah, it could work.
It could be abandoned.
Or it could have been something that they built to appease the dragon, and it's just a matter of like, so there's like, whether it's still, doesn't really fit flora and fauna though. Unless it's one of those things where they put the temple up, they worship the thing, and after a couple of 100 years, when this thing's no longer like, eating mass numbers of it or whatever,
right,
they just thrive. So maybe there's like a tribe of like Arctic lizard folk that live up there, or not necessarily lizard folk. Like, what worships dragons usually? I don't think it's necessarily lizard folk. Kobolds? Kobolds are usually minions of others, but I'm trying to think of what would be like a good, like I said, like a good servant to a dragon. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, it could be that they had a couple of what's those large lizards that that have elemental abilities? Basilics?
Basilisk. Basilisk turns you to stone. Hold on. But that's not really flora and fauna, is it? Or is that what we're talking
creatures,
about?
yeah. Well, we're talking about so flora and fauna would be like predator or prey, physiology, biology, environmental impact, stuff like that. The basilics.
What level are the players?
I think around either. Some of them are 5 or 6. So let's say around 5 and 6. I think there is. I'm drawing a blank, and I don't have the monster manual on hand. I know there is definitely some kind of a. They're all lizards that do, not necessarily breathe lightning, but the equivalent. I thought it was. So it's not. If it's not a basilisk, then what am I thinking of? Drakes.
Drakes.
Drakes. That's what I'm thinking of. So yeah, it could be that there's a couple of orcs that live up there, but there's also a bunch of drakes that have been kind of thriving. That were maybe at some point either much smaller, or they were there for some reason or another for the to appease the dragon. Maybe part of this cult or this group of worshippers you were mentioning.
Yeti.
Yeti would work. Yeah.
Winter wolves. Frost giants. You're looking at a guard drake. That's what you were thinking of, guard drakes.
Mm-hmm. Drakes would work. Yeah, like if we're saying that there's a temple that kind of lived, well, a temple that was built at some point onto the mountain.
Yeah.
So even if they don't go anywhere near the temple, like the fact that the thing had been there for a long time, the followers probably had to pushed out of it. You know what I mean? And I was like, all right, maybe there's still a handful of worshippers who are still there, but they don't really leave the temple. But there's all right, well, we'll set a couple people outside the temple, and then outside kind of just kept their territory kind of kept encroaching, not in very large numbers, mind you, but probably just the fact that there is just an odd handful of drakes and others that kind of call the mountain their lands now.
Yep.
And that's also maybe the reason why a lot of people choose not to really go there, is because you don't necessarily want to deal with whatever that is.
Yeah. So you have this mountain. Is it a mountain range?
It's more like a singular mountain.
It's just like a singular mountain with no other mountains around it. So it's an oddity.
There were other mountains further north, further to the northwest, but this is just a peak.
So then how did it form?
Mountain. How did it form?
Because that's not usually how mountains form. So I'm just curious. How it's an oddity. How did it form?
It could have been. It could have been a volcano that and then as it erupted and kind of settled down, and then others kind of emerged up and whatnot. So and just over time, it just cooled, and then just colder and colder until it became just like well, I mean, there's plenty of mountains that are actually former dormant or just completely inactive volcanoes, right?
Yeah, but they're usually part of a mountain range.
That's true, I suppose. Well, I mean, granted, they were also talking about a setting where there's flying dragons.
But that's not always the case. The islands of Hawaii were made. There's 1 or 2 mountains that are just straight up, and then, the other mountains aren't next to them. So it could happen. I was just curious as to what your thinkings were.
What if it's not actually a mountain and just a
it's
giant
a molehill?
Well, no, I was going to say a giant ancient glacier. And it's just so cold that it's just never really broken apart or dissipated or whatever. So it's people still make excursions to it, but it's just pure ice, And that also could be the reason why the White Dragon liked it so much.
Mm.
That's also the reason why the Remorhaz probably likes it. It's just and so that you can still have pockets where there's lakes that might form or crevasses and things
John,
like that.
Everything that you're saying is absolutely possible. I was just asking questions to see put some thought. Dave just said that he was listening intermittently, so I told him that's good. We're talking intermittently.
Yeah.
Okay, so if that's the case, then how far up the mountain before it turns to ice?
I would think that like probably like halfway up.
Halfway up.
Yeah, like you kind of make it because like maybe the actual like the land itself isn't as high as people think.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just that there was just this giant chunk of ice that just collided at some point. Like maybe it drifted over and it just was just so cold it just never thawed, and then just eventually like more like because of like because it's by the coast and maybe because it's so cold like snow just forms, and especially with the ice dragon. Maybe this, and because of the temple, maybe that's kind of kept it cold.
Yeah.
So this is one of those things that, like,
maybe there's a portal to the
ice plane.
Demi-plane of ice.
Good work.
Or just like it doesn't have to be like a fully open portal. People walk but enough to allow the cold through.
Yeah.
One of the layers of the abyss or something like that. I don't know. Just thought.
Could also be where the dragon went to.
He got sucked in.
Yeah. But So like I said, Yetis, drakes.
Yeah.
I like the idea of like a just sparsed out like snow lizards or whatever.
Village of Yeti. No.
Yeah, but what would they like? I think because it's just so cold and it's just ice. It's like I think things probably would only live there if they have to.
Winter wolves. Yeti. Frost giant.
It could be a frost giant. Yeah, like it maybe it came over from the plane of ice. Or it was frozen in part of it, and it kind of busted loose, and there's just a frost giant that's just there with a pack of orcs that it just keeps as both pets and food. Probably protected it from other possible threats. So you got a frost giant and its flock of orcs.
There's Crystal Cavern, which is made of ice. I like that.
And kind of like the cavern maybe leads to that portal.
Yeah.
Say damaged portal to ice plane.
And the cavern is filled with crystal. Excuse me. Is filled with crystal stalagmites and stalactites that create a maze, a reflecting maze.
Yeah. Cool. Maybe there's some elementals inside it, just because like they just kind of come over from the plane. Like things come over but can't get back out of it, basically.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like
so it's one way.
Right. So
okay.
That's cool. And then in terms of let's say like actual environmental impact, like for the most part, like that also could be the reason why none of these things have ever really came down from the mountain, because they're just so used to the cold, they just can't thrive in anywhere else where it's warmer. So
there's never been any need.
Right, like this, it's kind of like formed its own perfect little ecology in this little spot right here. So like they have no need to venture outward. But also could be that they're trying to find a way back, and maybe like none of them have figured out how to get the portal to work, or none of them are smart enough, or just that it's just none of them realize that it's damaged.
Right.
Like they might try to do a bunch of things without realizing like, it's not working.
Yep. Okay. All right. So you have an isolated mountain it's frozen at the top, which is probably a leftover glacier, which became the home of a white dragon that had a portal open, which causes an unnatural cold to overcome it. Mm-hmm. So you're not even sure if the dragons can still be there, just sleeping.
Well, it could be, or it could be frozen. Like it could be so cold that the dragon just
is alive, but just frozen.
Dormant, like hibernate, like it's just so cold.
You have a Remorhaz in a mountain lake,
which is really just a crevasse that's just melted ice.
Yeah.
Also explains why the heck is there a lake at the top of this thing. It's like, well, because the Remorhaz is there.
Yeah, it wasn't a lake. It was just a crater or a bowl, and then the Remorhaz sat there and it just melted it. And then there's a crystal cavern, which is the human entrance to what would have been the dragon's lair.
Yeah, like it could be that the caverns kind of both lead So, like one way leads to the temple, another
Yeah.
one leads to the portal.
Yeah. Okay. Good. I like that.
And because somewhere on the mountain there's going
I
to
like
be
where that's going.
somewhere on the mountain is like a potion smith. There was a potion smith who kind of settled there. Maybe the reason
He's frozen now.
yeah, well, yeah, that could work.
Ooh. Oh, a completely frozen, iced over village.
Well, yeah, see, but the thing of it, like, if the mountaintop was, let's say, a glacier, and it just, like I said, like maybe like the land is
The worshippers of the dragon, the cult of the dragon, they're completely frozen.
okay.
They didn't abandon anything. They just never. They were just frozen.
Like basically, just like one day the portal just opened really wide and just like just
Just a blast of cold.
and they just freeze. It could also be what happened to the dragon. The dragon's there; it's just frozen solid.
Yeah, everything's frozen in time. Everything they encounter, except for like Yetis have. There's like some monsters that have gone back and have claimed some space back.
Well, the
I like
frost
that.
giant.
Yeah.
Like maybe like it was warm enough for some of the ice to melt, but like because that's part of the cavern.
Or
Like,
they
once you get
came
away
by
from
after.
the cavern, like right.
They came by. It was like an initial cataclysmic event for that localized event, and then creatures started coming back. But the creatures that were already there were trapped in the ice.
And it could be the reason why there's still a couple of pockets of them is just like like it's just been these couple of pockets that have just kind of tried to survive on their own, but
I like it.
but never really they never received word to come back. They never got any messages or anything like that, and none of them ever thought to go check.
Yeah.
Because I guess either one, they might not be able to make their way through the maze. They might have forgotten the way back through, or two, like if they do go all the way through, it just might be so cold that they might just freeze over. Like at some point, you come to just a wall where it's just like it's so cold. And if anybody's stupid enough to seal up the portal, like, oh, okay, yeah, you seal up the portal,
Yep.
that's fantastic. Now things are going to start thawing, so, oops,
And maybe that's it. Maybe things are starting to thaw.
The portal's getting smaller over time, or maybe something's doing something.
Yeah.
Could be why the potion smith was there in the first place, is that they was just like, there was something that they couldn't put a finger on. They didn't, like, picking up on, like, maybe, like, traces of energy, like, they were, like, siphoning things from the portal. Like, just like, oh man, things are really cold here. Like, I don't know where that's coming from, but like, I'll set up some runes and some artifacts that kind of like, help drain that energy. That also could have been maybe what caused it to just flash over, is that they made it open too wide without realizing, and just the whole mountain kind of glossed over just a giant ice sheet.
Right. Okay. I like that. I like that way that works. You got 1 minute left on this topic.
Again, I think we've been kind of hitting it out of the park here. I think we're pretty good. Anything in the chat? Any
Just Dave
suggestions,
so
questions?
far. Just
Okay.
Dave so far.
Cool. Well, because the next topic would be, which also could work off of this, encounters and dangers. Hazards, traps, pitfalls, size and scope, layout, enemy composition and placement, loot rewards.
Loot rewards. And this is
Now this, I don't know if I necessarily want to do this, because if, let's say, anybody from my game does pick up on it, I'd rather they not know. So what about, instead of, let's say, doing necessarily like an encounter, what are some of the hazards and dangers that they might run into when dealing with, let's say, a frozen environment? Probably a lot of environmental checks. I'm not too sure if I want to do this myself. So that's why I'm wondering if there's something we can maybe pivot off into something else. I know you're thinking about more like module stuff for your thing.
But let's go through it again. We're looking at
encounters and dangers, hazards, traps, pitfalls, size and scope, layout, enemy composition and placement, loot rewards. This could be just something completely fresh. Like maybe we just come up with an encounter that somebody could use in their game. That's not one that either you or me are using. That would be perfectly viable for any just standard setting. Something encounters and dangers. Why don't we continue off with the idea that we were mentioning with the temple? So yeah, let's do that. Not necessarily something that I would use 1-to-1. What are the kind of dangers you would encounter with a frozen over temple? You still have probably the trap. Like, in fact, if anything, I would think that might be even more dangerous, because whatever traps and pitfalls were there, they're broken. Not in the sense that they don't work anymore, but in the sense of like what used to trigger them is completely different now. Like, let's say you have like a pressure plate, but if the pressure plate's completely frozen over, like what's to stop, let's say, something like a mechanism from like, oh, you pulled the string like, would safely move things over, but the mechanism that would work with it is shut. So you pull this thing, the whole thing drops out, and now this giant boulder comes barreling down anyway. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Your actions can cause other things from occurring.
So yeah, so let's come up with an idea of something that would work out in, let's say, a frozen temple, an encounter or danger. So let's continue off with that idea of like a damaged trap that is still a trap.
Okay. So
I got an idea. Well, at least not necessarily an idea. I think
okay. All right.
Let's go with the easiest thing to go off of. Your standard pitfall trap.
Okay.
Complicating things is that what might used to be or was previously safe ground to cover is now completely frozen over. So, like, so no matter what, you run the risk of, let's say, just sliding into this trap. Because there really is no safe ground to cover. What are some other things to maybe, other things that could potentially add to, let's say, the challenge? Like, again, hazards, traps, pitfalls. So we have the trap. It's a pit trap. And we know what the hazard is that it's, the corridor that it's in.
Stalagmites at the bottom of the pit that weren't there before. So now it's a spiked pit trap instead of just a pit trap.
Like it used to just be like a hole, and they would come over and grab prisoners, but maybe like water drip from the ceiling, and over time it just...
Yeah. Built up.
So it's frozen spikes.
Could also work the other way, right? You could fall into the pit, and stalactites could fall on you.
Right.
Maybe there's even a piercer or two.
Sorry, a piercer? Oh, like stuff from the walls that comes out, or
no? A piercer. Piercer's an actual monster.
What's a monster? Well, I'm just not familiar with it.
Oh, it's a stalactite. The monster looks like a living stalactite, and it falls on
like
creatures.
a rubber?
No.
No, I'm saying, but like it looks like something, but it's actually not.
Yeah.
I think I might have heard of this once, but I don't know if I've ever actually encountered one myself. I'm pulling up the image. I don't know if you're going to be able to... No, just do an image search, but it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah. I'll find one.
So, a piercer. That could work. Well, how would this thing... Like, if there's not that many people who come by the temple, how's this thing, surviving for that long? Also, how does it get back up to the top?
It's got appendages.
So basically, like, it would just, let's say, just drop on something, and then after a while, it would kind of pull its way back up.
Yeah.
Don't knock over your thing.
But that was the classic picture of it.
Oh, just like just stalactites put faces on them.
Yeah.
You gonna put it into the? You put it into the chat.
I'm gonna have to. There's the roper. This is a piercer, so it drops down with this.
Okay,
and then
yeah, I
it
think
curls
that
itself
looks
back
familiar.
into the top.
Okay.
Like that.
Okay. So all right, so let's continue to design this track.
Yeah. So you know what we should do is, I don't know. I'll get some. At some point, I'll get some stuff ready ahead of time, so that we can put it in the chat. So that I can put it here. We gotta work on an overlay. So I'm gonna work on that next for you.
But anyway, so size and scope. Something that's like probably wouldn't be anything too grand. Like, I'm not picturing it's like a major part of the temple. It's probably just like, all right, like you're coming down like through, let's say, from like maybe you have to come into a couple of entry chambers. You come to a hallway that used to, let's say, lead to like a circular room that would then pivot off into other hallways. But there was this kind of pit trap that previously was there, kind of, let's say, halfway in the middle of it.
Right.
So, and ideally, like, what would happen is that you would walk, and then, let's say, like, you'd hit a pressure point, and then it would just make the ground fall out, and then there'd just be this giant pit, and people would come in and, like, grab people that were trapped or whatever. So now the problem is, because the whole ground is frozen over, you have this sheet of ice that is like, the way I'm picturing is that, like, you have, like, the pit itself is probably large enough that, like, either it would drop out from underneath you, or it would be very difficult to, let's say, jump over. Or at least, maybe, like, if you had, like, rope and stuff like that, you can kind of come across. But now that it's frozen, it's like, how do you do that? Because you don't have a whole lot of traction. If you try to jump from one side to the other, it's like jump on a sheet of ice, try to jump over, let's say, like a 20-foot pit, and land on the other side.
What about what about it's now a covered pit?
Oh, with like a sheet of ice?
A sheet of obscured ice. Maybe there's some snow over it, so you can't see through, so you can't see that it's actually a pit. But the ice is thin, and your weight breaks it.
Right, so no matter what, like previously it used to be like, oh, if you stepped on, you could get around it by stepping on the right thing, but people don't realize, no, that the pit's been exposed for years, so now it's just there, so just basically like a false floor pit trap.
Yeah. So what happened was it wasn't sprung, right? Then ice formed over it, and from the weight of the ice,
Triggered.
It fell through, but the ice didn't fall. But now when you walk across it, it's thin ice, and you fall through.
What would the save be? Just like an athletic save, or like
it's dexterity, same as a pit trap appearing, like falling out from underneath you. It's the exact same thing. It's a covered pit.
I think actually what I would do is, because I picture it being a pretty large pit. Like I'm thinking like 20 by 20, not the kind of thing that you could easily like just jump over in a single stride.
Okay.
So it's like, let's say like you start jumping and then you do a dex save to jump, and then like if you can't clear another 10 feet, either do another dex save or something like that. Because like, all right, you jump and you land on
so it's
ice
cracking,
like you're cracking.
Yeah.
And then, because also to make people like, oh god, like, here's this whole thing covered. You know what I mean? So like dex save, and then unless you can clear 10 feet.
Got it. That makes sense.
And then the thing is that like so let's say if we did want to do, let's say like a piercer, I think the problem though is that like if this hallway is not that tall
it's just a recommendation.
Well, because also like if the hallway's not that tall up, you know what I mean, like it might be hard to like, you have like a pretty obvious thing there right in the middle of it. Would there be anything else in the hallway that would kind of work to kind of be like?
What about ice needles?
In what sense?
Like there were blowholes in the side, and they shoot out needles.
Yeah, but if the pressure plates are frozen over, like technically whatever would have triggered them would have already been there.
I guess so.
Unless it's one of those things where like the walls are coated with these needles, and then like if you inadvertently, let's say like crash into one of them, you could take damage.
Oh, I got one. A blade trap.
Okay.
So it's in a wall that has something that the players want to read on it. So in order to read it, they have to chip away at the ice. So they could accidentally chip away too much of the ice, thus releasing the blade that swings out from the wall.
So there's like a message, or like a just like a message, or just like some kind, or maybe like a.
So here's what it was, right?
Like a tapestry.
Right. No. There was something engraved in the wall right here.
Yeah.
Right. And there was a pressure plate on the floor. And as a person, this is the way it used to work. As you walked closer, if you didn't know about the pressure plate, you stepped on it, a blade would slice across this way, horizontally. But now it's all frozen, so the pressure plate doesn't work anymore. Or the pressure plate is permanently in release. However, there's also ice on the wall, so it can't be released. So as the players start chipping away the ice, there's a chance that they'll clear the slot that's blocking the blade, and the blade can swing free.
Right.
So they can accidentally cause it.
Just writing it down.
Yeah.
It's not even a matter of that. It's not even a matter of that. There's the chance that the blade is going to come loose if they chip the ice. Like if they, depending on how they get rid of it, if they chip too much of it away, then no, whoosh, it's just going to come loose.
It's just going to come loose.
Oh no! Forget about, because a blade trap might be, that could be something where like what if the the mechanisms inside the wall, like how those hold up? What if it's just a boulder? Like what if it's just like there's a thing in there?
You don't have to worry about the mechanism. It's spring. It's spring loaded. It's been released, and the ice is just blocking it from finishing its swing.
Or that, or like it's trying to push through and it can't, and like if you clear enough, it finally has enough to like the momentum of it can finish the rest of it. So like
correct.
Like all of a sudden the rest of the wall comes jutting out as the sheet of ice kind of snaps loose, as at the same time this giant scythe comes clearing through and kind of swipes at you.
got it.
And anytime I think they do a deck save, I think because it's all frozen over, that they got to do a disadvantage.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what makes it even more dangerous.
Still have some extra time. What other hazards and stuff like that could we add to, let's say, this little frozen ice temple traps?
Okay. So...
what about loot? Because you mentioned a couple of... We talked about some enemy placements. It could be that, as they kind of futzing around the temple, maybe there's things in there that are frozen solid, and maybe there's things that either have been thriving in the absence of whatever was in the temple previously, or maybe if they start to, let's say, thaw things out, these things kind of start to shake loose, and then as a result, they start to attack the party. They might also have disadvantage unless they're specifically built for it. Unless I like the idea of let's say, all right, temple's frozen over. What would make sense for something then to, let's say, take up residence inside this place now that it's morally just ice? Either just occasionally finding a frozen body and just living off of that for however long, or let's say a couple of people stupid enough to kind of stumble in and springing on that.
Well, I thought we talked about what would be here.
No, I know. I'm saying I said we know what would be what was there previously that was then frozen over. I'm talking about let's say in this temple, it's it was like a dragon, let's say a white dragon temple, and it was previously a bunch of god drakes and let's say quote unquote lizard folk, but we don't really have anything solid for them just yet. They're all completely froze over, and a tribe of yetis has taken up residence inside the
Sure.
temple.
Yeah, sure. And did you ask about loot?
Loot is an option, so yeah, we could say that what's possibly still there that could be salvaged, or what could be more valuable because of the ice. I don't know if there's anything that would become more valuable because it's frozen, but
So what about? I think loot's loot. You can just figure out what needs to go there.
Yeah,
what about
a frozen chest with a bunch of stuff?
What about?
I just had a great idea.
Okay, I'm listening.
A frozen mimic. There's a chest where there's a bunch of stuff in there, and some of it actually is actual treasure, but if they, let's say, try to chip away too much of it, the mimic revives and attacks them.
I like that.
Because nobody would think because it's the chest is already open. It must have gotten pried open or whatever.
On an altar in the temple
Mm-hmm.
is a dagger whose blade is pure cold. It's got a white blade. Removing the dagger from its placement on the altar, which is stuck. It requires some work. If they remove it, it starts to reverse the frozen curse, and creatures and things like the dragon can start coming back.
Okay. What if instead of an altar? Because I think
it could be whatever you want. I'm more interested in the weapon.
I'm thinking. What about this? Going back with the idea of the elemental portal and whatnot. What if there's just a weapon from the plane of ice that it kind of came through, and part of the reason why it's so cold is that this weapon is just got lodged and just kind of started encroaching over.
Sure. And
dislodging the weapon removes it from whatever surface it was touching, so it no longer encroaches it, and as a result, it's now
I think it should be a dagger.
Yeah, dagger would work just fine, and yeah, it could have been what is something in the elemental plane of ice that would use a dagger?
Genasi? Sure, it could be anything really. I mean, it could have been. It could have been a portal to an abyssal plane that's ice cold, and it could have been a demon lord whose dagger was lost. Someone threw it through the portal and it got lodged, and whatever reason, it doesn't matter. It got there. All of that works. I like it.
Yeah, it starts to thaw things out, not instantaneously, but definitely if they linger for a while,
it prevents it from staying permanent.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't boom, everything wakes up.
No.
you know. But it
But it
starts
could-
a
but it-
countdown.
But also, yeah, it could be that, like, oh, yeah, like, you, as you're starting around, like, one of those things that, like, was standing over here, it's now over there. And, like, these things are, like, they're, like slowly kind of starting to come
Well,
loose.
what would happen is as they go deeper, you can keep track of time, and over time, they'll start to see a mist form by their
Right.
feet, which is melting ice.
Mhm.
And that should start giving them a hint that, you know what, maybe they need to go.
And if they, like, don't put two and two together and they're like, oh, I'm going to detect magic. No, you don't detect magic. It's just there's a strange mist that
That's
just
what
seems to
happens
be-
when ice melts.
It's rising up from the ground.
Cool. I like that. All right, John.
I think that's some cool stuff.
I think we did. I think you did good. I think you did good. All right. So let's wrap it up.
I don't know, final thoughts? Anything you want to chime in on any of the three topics we came up with, or...
No, I thought they were pretty good. I think the discussion will be good. It'll be nice when we can get somebody else to come on.
Yeah.
Right? You know, we'll talk with
Help them
Anthony.
out
We'll
with
talk
this,
with Dave. Jason, I'm sorry. Talk with Jason.
Mm-hmm.
People can come on board, and I think it'll be great.
or additional comments and stuff like that, like people on
Yeah,
Facebook.
yeah.
If you have any ideas or thoughts or things that you'd like to see on the show as well, by all means, you can definitely message us on Facebook. I believe I also last time set up an email for the show, which I'm going to try to pull it up really quick. I think it was, what was it? Hold on. Rocks with an S, ROCKS, and rolls suggestions at gmail.com. That is, again, ROCKS and rolls, ROLLS, suggestions at gmail.com.
I will work on the I'll have Russ work on the overlays, and when we get the overlays, I will add that email address onto the overlay, so people will be able to see it. Okay. I think that was pretty good. Actually, give me that email address again.
Yep, it is rocks and rolls suggestions.
ROLLS.
ROLLS. Yep. ROCKS and ROLLS suggestions at gmail.com.
That's SUGGESTIONS.
Rocks and rolls suggestions. Can you see it? Is it there?
Yep.
Yep. Perfect. And so next episode is going to be in 2 weeks, which would be
2 weeks at 9:30.
Yes, 2 weeks at 9:30. That is not the 18th, but the 25th, the week of Thanksgiving. So just before the holiday season.
That's right. That's right. It'll be good.
Yep.
I'll be looking forward to it.
Yep. Awesome. And this Friday is our second episode, or second streaming.
Second session.
Yep, second session. Basically D&D.
Basically D&D. 1983 retrospective historical look of Dungeons and Dragons. Join John as his characters gain more hit points. We'll explain later. But join us then. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, I'm John.
I'm Rich.
All right. And see you next time.
Absolutely.